Welcome to the Stutzman channel. Today I have one of my son's cars which has a charging issue. It is it's a 2014 Ford Edge, got a 3.5 liter engine, and the problem is very intermittent. You could be driving along, it's charging, everything is fine, and all of a sudden the charge indicator light will come on, stay on a few seconds, a minute or two, then it'll go back off and it's charging again. So I did some diagnostics on it. I captured some picoscope waveforms. I got some scan data. And so if you would like to see that, the technical aspects of the diagnostics and what I came to the conclusion that the alternator is bad, let me know and I'll put together a video. Now in this video, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be removing and installing this here alternator. And it is a very confined space. It is hard to get to, so we're going to show you that, and we're going to go ahead and remove and replace this alternator. So without further ado, let's get going on it. We have a 2014 Ford Edge. It's got a 3.5 liter V6 engine in it, and today we're going to be removing and replacing the alternator. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the negative battery cable, 10mm socket. We'll take care of that and then tuck them off to the side. Okay, we're going to remove the mass airflow sensor connector. Now underneath there's a red tab, so you want to pull it back, and then underneath there's a tab you want to push up, and while you're pushing it up it should slide right off of there.
There you go.
Look at this tab where you pull it out and then you push this here tab in and then pull it off. Now this mass airflow sensor harness is attached to the air box, so we're going to be removing that. So objective here is to remove this here air box. So I'm going to be loosening this here hose clamp up, 8mm socket on that bolt right there. So we're going to loosen him up. And also, let's go ahead and there's two clips. One is right here, and then there's another one that's up underneath right there. Alright, so we're going to loosen them. And now, let's see if we can just go ahead and kind of get this here, top of this air box off. And then there's three pegs down over here. So you got one there, one here that goes in the slots. So I'm just going to go ahead and lift them out. Okay. Air filter looks reasonably clean. We have two bolts here. 8mm socket will take care of that. So we'll go ahead and we'll take these out. That's what they look like, the bolts that came holding the air filter box down. There's two pegs underneath the air box that fits in the rubber grommets underneath, so we should be able to just pull up and lift this thing straight out of here. So there's our two pegs, and you can see they fit down in these two rubber grommets. Alright, now we got to be taking this whole cooling fan assembly out. So here's a connector that feeds the two fan motors. So there's a tab on this side, press it in, and while you press it in, you can pull it back. So I'm pushing it in, slide it right off. Alright, before I start removing the cooling fan assembly, I figured I'll just go ahead and we'll remove this here inspection cover. The alternator is way down there, so this inspection cover is coming over, so let's just go ahead and we'll get him on out of the way. So I'm using a clip zip tool, putting it underneath here. Let's just see if we can pull them up. Okay, and that's what he looks like. Looks like we have another bolt or nut right here down there that's holding this here cover. So let me go ahead and get that nut off. I'm using an 8mm socket screw this nut off. Nut, I just got it screwed off. Alright, let's see if we can get this thing off now. So you can see what it looked like down there. And there's a stud for it. Now it may be hard to see, but here's where our alternator is at, and it's way down in here. Now, the service manual doesn't say anything about removing this here top radiator hose, but looking this thing over, I think it'd be probably a good idea. So I'm thinking what we could do is we'll loosen up this hose clamp, and then we'll slide this back. Hopefully we won't lose too much coolant, you know, since it's up on the top. Anyway, so I'll put a pan underneath, catch what we can, and then we'll take this here hose and just kind of fold it back out of the way. Alright, I got the upper radiator hose removed from the top here, and I got it just bent and swung around over here to the side. It's got a little dribble coming out, not too much coolant, and I got a catch pan underneath to catch it. Now this here wiring harness right here is attached to the top of the cooling fans, and it's got some fasteners here. So you can see one of them is right there. So I'm going to take my zip clip tool. I'm just going to put it right up underneath, slide under there, squeeze it, and it should just pop right out.
Nice.
So I'm going to just go right on down. Here's another one. Got another one over here. Another one right here. Okay. And I believe one right there. Now we have this here freed up. Okay. And I may just take and also we have another. There's a connector right here. So I'm going to squeeze this tab, and we're going to pull and disconnect him. So now we can just give us some access here so we can pull this here cooling fan assembly out. Now there should be two bolts that's holding this here cooling fan assembly in, and one of them is right here. 8mm socket. We'll take care of that. And that's what he looks like. Okay, now the other bolt is on the other side. It's right up underneath the opening here, top opening on the radiator. It's right below it. 8mm again. And once I get this out, I'll catch you in the next shot. It looks just like the other one. Trying to be very careful not to hit this here radiator. We don't want to damage it.
Yes.
Okay. There's that. Yeah, fans look pretty good as far as the bearings. There was no issues on the cooling fan anyway. Now over here, it was continued dribbling out, so I took a cap, plastic cap, and I just put over here to keep it from dribbling out, you know, to cool it. I forgot to mention it, but before I pulled the cooling fan assembly out, I took this here wiring harness and I just tie wrapped it, pulled it back out of the way, so I got a set of tie wraps here, and then I put one over here and I just tied it to the upper radiator hose. Right, on the alternator, I just removed this 3-pin connector. All you have to do is just push in on the tab right here, push in it, and while you push it in, pull it straight up. Okay, so now let's put this, let's move this, get this rubber boot pulled off, so we can go ahead and take this here cable off. Alright, so we're going to be removing this nut. This is going to be a 13mm socket. Alright, so we got the cable, it's disconnected. Now I'm going to put the nut, I'm just going to put it right back on the stove. Now just remove the right front tire, 19mm socket will take care of the lug nuts for you. Now we're going to be removing these fasteners There's some screws here, 7/32 head on them for a socket. And we have these here fasteners, and they just push in. There's there. And then we also have some more of these bolts here, or screws, 7/32 head again. And so that's what I'm going to be doing, is I'm going to be taking those out. So no need to bore you on that. So when I get all of it out, then we'll remove this here inner cover. Now I just want to point out that there's this little molding piece right here, and the inner liner is tucked in behind it. So the two screws will come out, and then we're just going to pull this off. And now you can see what we have there. So I just want to point that out before we go any further. For these plastic fasteners, they're made up of two pieces. So what I like to do is just kind of get up underneath it a little bit, kind of give myself a little clearance, kind of wedge it up a little bit. Then I'll take my zip clip tool, I'll slide up underneath, and then I'll just pull that piece out. And then this piece right here should just slide out of there. And there we go. Then you could come back and then you could take your piece and then you can just kind of slide it in. Leave it out a little bit because it's easier to put it in, push it in, then you come back and then push the top in. Alright, just want to show that we got this inner splash shield removed, and I'm looking over the belt arrangement here. Now I drew a little diagram here. Now there's two belts on here, two serpentine belts. This here crank pulley has two grooves in it. One groove is for this here belt, it's just driving the power steering pulley, which we're not going to be messing with that. And what I'm interested in is this belt right here. So it goes around the crank pulley, it's underneath the tensioner, alternator, it goes up over the top, comes down, and then the AC compressor, and then back to the crank pulley. And this one right here, this is in the outside groove, furthest way out here to closest to the wheel, and then this one is on the inner groove for the crank pulley. Alright, this is really tight up in here. Alright, so this is our tensioner. Now right now I have the belt still on the alternator, and I've loosened this here bolt up that's on the alternator, and let's see if I can go ahead and we can take this thing out. And it's got a washer on it. It's a pretty long bolt. Okay. And there we have the first bolt out, and this is the one that's on the bottom. And if I didn't mention it, that was a 15mm socket that I used on that with a ratchet. Okay, I just got the belt tensioner, released to get the belt off of the alternator. So you have to push up to take the tension off, and it is tight. You cannot get it's a 3/8 hole up here in this here tensioner. You cannot get a ratchet up in there, so I had to use this here tool, which is a lot slimmer, so I could get in there to get this thing, get it to be released. It's probably, I don't know how much room, but it ain't very much. I mean, it's so tight, it's even trying to get this tool back off of here. Ugh. I mean, this is what you got. That's how much clearance is in there, and I mean it barely fits in there, so it is very tight. And it's a 3/8 inch drive. There's a square notch up in here in the tensioner. Let me show you that. You can see it right up in there. You can see that square notch. That's where the tool was at. And then you, like I said, you push up on the tensioner to take the tension off. Alright, now we have another bolt. It's actually a stud that goes through the top of the alternator, and there's a nut on it, and it is buried down in there. So this here hose, this coolant hose, is really in the way, So here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking we're going to take this hose here off, get it out of the way, and then we're going to take this here coolant bottle, and there's 1, 2, 3 bolts, looks like an 8mm head on it, and we're just going to take it and try to lift this thing out of the way so we can get a little bit of access to get a tool down there to get that nut off. Okay, let's go ahead. We'll get this hose off. Okay, that was a pretty long snout on there. Like I said, on this coolant bottle, there's 3 bolts. One is here, and then there's 2 up here that's mounted up on the fender. So I'm going to go ahead and be taking those out. Catch you in the next shot. And there's the 3 bolts for the coolant bottle. Okay, so I got the coolant bottle, and I am just going to sit it kind of right over there. Now at least I can see the stud down there. Of course, it's still a little tight trying to get down in there, but let's see what we can do. That's that nut that was on top of the stud, on the top of the alternator with a stud coming out, and that was a 15mm socket to fit that. Okay, if you remember, I told you about a stud that was on the top, you know, and there was a nut here. So I wound up, I took this stud out, and it's a 7mm head on it, so I use a short socket on it. And now, let's go ahead and get this thing out of here. What a pain in the ass this thing has been. Being very careful not to hit the radiator. And so there we go. There is our prize. Finally. Now I have the old alternator out, and I'm going to compare it to the new one as far as the communication lines and the sense line here. Now on the new one, on pin 1, which is down here at the bottom, you can see the latch is over here. So down on pin 1, I'm showing OL, out of limits. Go to pin 2, next one up, out of limits. Go to pin 3, out of limits. Now I go to the old one, I look down here, that one says 561 ohms, pin 2, 568.3, going to the next one up, 575.5. Now whether that means something or not, I don't know, but it is different. Alright, to get this thing out is a little bit bare because there is everything around it is just covered up. You can't pry nothing out, you can't get underneath it, you can't get over top of it. And so what I found the best way to get this thing out is there's a stud, as you saw earlier, that goes through here. Take the stud out. Down here on the bottom, there's a clamp that's on the engine block that fits just like that. I'm sorry, it goes inside. It goes inside like this. Now what happens is that when the bolt goes through and comes out over here and you have a nut, you can see how the nut is pulled out now. Well, what happens is that when you turn this here bolt, and this nut will go in, and it will actually press in on the side of that bracket. So once you get this stud out, and you got this bolt out, then it's a matter of just kind of rocking it back and forth, and if you can ever get it down, then you could probably get something back here to kind of prise it out. But that's what I found out was probably the easiest way, because I left the stud in here thinking that I could come in here and swing this thing out, and there was no way, because like I said, you cannot get anything around it to pry it out, because it is buried and covered all the way around. I mean, you can't even get your hand up through the bottom. So anyway, that's what I found. Take the stud out, take this bolt out, and you just kind of rock it, and then if you get it rocked enough, then you could come in here and maybe pry against the block, you know, against the housing, and then you can get this thing out. So right now I got it in. Now I found that it's easier to take the stud out when you remove the alternator, but when you put it back in, be sure to put the stud back in, so that way you can take this here hole, put it down in there, and then slide it back. Make sure this part is tilted out so it can go past the bracket. Then once you get it all the way on the stud, this is going to be your guide. So you can put it in, let it slip in, and then come back, put your bolt in, and then come back up here and put your nut on. But it's still to get access to it. It is a PIA. So anyway, I got the alternator back in. I got the bolt in on the bottom. I got the nut on top of the stud. So now I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put the belt on. Get it around, just, you know, get the serpentine belt back on. And then at that point, I'm going to let the belt tensioner pull the alternator as far back in the bracket as it can go. And then at that point, then I'm going to tighten down on that bottom bolt, and then I'll finish it up on the nut on the top. So that's the plan. That's what we're going to be doing next. I got a new belt on, and that's done. And I use a Napa belt. If anybody's interested, there's a part number. So after I got the belt on, I tighten up the bolt on the bottom of the alternator. Like I said earlier, that would pull that in with the belt tensioned, and then that tighten that bolt up. Then I came back up on the top, and then I tightened the nut up here on the top of the alternator. Now right now, I got the coolant bottle back in place. Again, this is 3 8mm head bolts. So we're just snugging these back in. And then just 2 back here on the fender. So once I get these, then I'll catch you. Oh, and then we're going to put this here hose back on. And once we get that, then we'll catch you back in the next shot. One thing I forgot to mention when we were disassembling it, and you'll see it when you start taking the cables off of the alternator, there is a wire loom. There's a hole right here on the alternator, so you can see there's a plastic fastener, so that's got to get pushed up in there in that hole. So, alright, you want to be sure to snap in your 3-wire connector. Probably hard to see, but it's right here on this here harness, so push it down. And also get your B plus cable back on here, a 13mm socket. We'll take care of that. We don't want to break nothing. Then take a rubber boot, and we'll get him slid back over there. Alright. Okay.
Done, baby.
I am happy with that. Alright, now we're going to put the cooling fans in next. Now if we look right down here, you can see they have these slots here. So there's a slot over here, and there's a slot right over here. So we're going to slide the fan assembly down into those 2 slots. So I got the fan assembly, slid right in. Make sure it's in there secure. And now we're going to get the 2 bolts. Remember, one is over here, and one is right over here. Now we're going to take the connector. And by the way, those 2 bolts are 8mm heads. Okay, so we're going to take the connector. And we slide them on. It clicks. And also we have another one down here. But I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to cut the tie wraps, and then we'll come back to him. Alright, the next thing I'm going to do, instead of trying to work on the harness, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get this hose back in. This radiator hose. Let's take the cap off. Alright. Alright, I'll catch you guys in the next shot once I get that on. Alright, so we got the upper radiator hose on. And now let's work on this wiring harness. So here's our connector over here on this end. Alright, so he's connected. Now let's put these fasteners, let's push them back down in. Alright. And then there's a mass airflow sensor connector. Now if you remember there was a nut down here, 8mm. Just snugging them up. And let's put these in there. Okay, looks good to me. Alright, next thing we're gonna put this air box back in. Now these grommets, you know, they're being dry and everything, so I'm gonna put a little bit of super grease on it. Just kind of make it a little bit easier going down. There's a tad inside the resonator here. Alright. Alright, so what we're doing, we're just putting this box in, just seating it down inside the rubber grommets there. And then we're going to have our 2 bolts up here, 8mm head on those. Alright, let's put our air filter in. Oh, by the way, if you're going to do this job, look at my hands.
I know, right?
This, you know, I told you earlier about how tight everything is on this engine, especially trying to get that alternator in and out. But anyway, wear some gloves. Just telling you now. And remember those 3 pegs? They go into the 3 slots. And then this will go into here. Okay. Make sure the top cover is all seated. And it looks good. And now we're going to get our clips. 2 clips that's over here. There's one. The other one is underneath. And now we're going to tighten this up. 8mm will take care of that. Mass airflow sensor connector. Little Christmas tree fastener. Push him down. Push him in. Take a red clip and be sure to push him in. And he's sound like he's seated. And there he's good. Alright, so the coolant that drained in the pan, went ahead and put a funnel in here, so we got it back up, filled it back up to the where it was. Okay, the last step was to put the battery cable back on, you know, the negative cable. And right now I've cranked the car up. I want to make sure this thing is looking okay before I start putting the splash shield over there on the right rear tire, right front tire, and, you know, putting the tire on. So I'm looking right now, it's 14.57, 50. So at the moment, it looks like it's okay. Alright, we're going to be putting in this shield, this inner splash shield. One thing I didn't mention it, there are 2 screws that's up under the bottom that ties into this other splash shield going across the front. So there's 2 of these screws, 7/32 heads on all of them. And there is 1 Christmas tree fastener. You remember the 2-piece fastener that was it's underneath here. So, no need to bore you. We'll catch you in the next shot. Okay, we got the inner splash shield on. And now we're going to put the tire on. Torque for the lug nuts, 100 pounds per foot. Okay, after getting everything back together, we took the car out for a test drive. We drove it for about 40 minutes. We went through the residential areas, we went through the country roads, got on the interstate, and we got about 35 miles on it. And I had the scanner on it and I was collecting data, you know, recording it. It was all fine. No problems, you know, whatsoever. So, for the moment, everything looks good. So we'll catch you guys in the next one. You take care.